GMA is a wonderful thing. I went to Los Angeles. And there's nothing left. For miles and hours of driving in traffic, you see nothing but concrete-lined creeks. There's no trees. There's nothing. And so to try to limit that so there actually is an access to the natural environment, I think is just absolutely critical. All right, so the other half of the dilemma. Salmon are dwindling, if not gone, in some areas. In where I ate, we're the most populous watershed in the Puget Sound area, and we have seen huge drops in our numbers. There's really only two reasons why we still have salmon. One is the Cedar River watershed, where it's basically preserved, and so there is habitat there, so a lot of salmon go there. The other piece is, like I said, is just outside of the urban growth boundary in the Bear Creek system, and that's all we have left, and we have less than 1,000 fish return, Chinook salmon return to the Bear Creek system per year. So it's hanging on by fingernails. And then the other side of that to keep in mind is that we have liability there. There's some very real ramifications from the tribes, from the federal government, if we don't do something about making sure that the Chinook salmon don't blink out of our area, in steelhead and other salmon. The other part, like I just mentioned, is living in a place where there's nothing left environmentally, I think is a huge loss. I grew up playing in creeks and wetlands, and I've seen those creeks and wetlands now that I'm a professional, and I really see how they've deteriorated over my lifetime, or let's call it 15 years. I'm not 15. But I've been paying very close attention for 15 years, and I've seen a huge difference. I ride my bike up and down the Sammamish River every day, for example, to and from work. And it's just nothing like it used to be when we could swim in it as a kid. I wouldn't let my dog swim in it now, and just from the pollution concerns alone. I think we kind of beat that one up pretty good. So the other side of it is we have a lot of regulations. We have regulations that are being put upon us by the state and by the federal government, and it's not a matter of are those justified or not? I consider them the stormwater permit. Everybody loves talking about the stormwater permit and how expensive it is and how it has produced nothing, and I strongly disagree with that. I've seen a lot of stuff get cleaned up because of that permit. We are kind of grappling with funding something that we didn't fund before, but quite frankly, that's our fault. We should have funded those things. You have an infrastructure we basically weren't taking care of, and that infrastructure extends to the natural environment, and it is our nexus to the natural environment from local governments. So we've got that regulation. We've already talked a little bit about the Endangered Species Act, and then the third piece is it's illegal because of the Clean Water Act to not do something when you have an impaired water body. I spent part of my career monitoring creeks, and I can tell you every one of your creeks is probably polluted. If you have 10% of your watershed, the area that drains to that creek is developed, it's polluted. It probably doesn't meet water quality standards for at least one of them. And what comes along with that, and the Department of Ecology tells me this on a regular basis, is that it doesn't matter what we do, we are 100% liable for every one of those creeks as a local government because we approve the development. So we're never off the hook. It's our responsibility, of course, it all comes back down to the local governments, to address those issues. I'm sure most of you probably know that you probably have impaired water bodies in your jurisdiction, but it's always good to know. So taking action, one of the things, now that I painted the ugly picture, the upside of it is that we can do something about this. But what we can't do is to sporadically do acts of kindness all over our jurisdictions. There's just way too much stuff to do. And so it is not against the rules to prioritize which things you're going to try to fix. This is a map of the city of Redmond. I don't know if people are familiar with, but Lake Sammamish is down here. This is the Bear Creek system that comes in, and this is where we still have salmon habitat out here. Fish die in this creek, or in the Sammamish River, because it's so hot and there's no oxygen in the water. It's also somewhat polluted. It's not too bad in that sense, but it's definitely not good habitat from a physical standpoint. There's no shade. There's the bottom's full of mud, that type of thing. The Army Corps of Engineers came through in the 60s, and this thing used to go like this, and they just straightened it out. and made it deep, and it's filled up with sediment since, and so it's just basically a death zone for fish. But what we did is, as local governments, we decided, okay, well, and we kind of abused the term watershed, but we carved out all the little watersheds that drained each one of our creeks and said, well, which ones do we think we can fix? I mean, like within a reasonable amount of time. And one of the take homes from this, and I think I'm getting ahead of myself in my presentation, is that in our comprehensive plan, the Growth Management Act requires us to not allow any new impacts to happen from development. But like I just said, they're all destroyed anyways. All your water bodies, well, not all of them, but a lot of them are already impacted. So why not just say we're going to restore? Just change the word from protection to restore. I did this at Bothel's Council. It hasn't been adopted yet. But I went through and just changed. Every time it said protect to restore. And that doesn't make you financially burdened. It doesn't do anything else. It just makes the point that you know the things aren't okay right now. And the other piece of it too is all the regulations that you're required to meet if you have a cleanup plan, or if you have a stormwater permit, or if you have an endangered species listing in your jurisdiction. You're already doing stuff to restore. So prioritizing your assets, I consider them assets. I no longer call them natural, whatever. They're assets. And so prioritizing which ones you're going to address really is an important step. Also, an important step is to know where they are. I've been shocked by the maps that I've seen of these, and I know these creek systems where DNR thinks they are and where the Department of Ecology thinks they are. They're not where they think they are. So knowing what you have and where it's at and how healthy or how unhealthy it is a huge step of getting in the right direction. So impacts from taking action, financial impacts, you have to have some skin in the game. I think if you have a stormwater utility, it's a natural extension to say it's not just about the pipes, it's about the creeks that we're dumping the water into. So you have to have some local money. The upside to that is if you make the change and say we're going to restore stuff and we have some money to put towards restoring it, federal money and state money will come flooding in. I've brought in over $8 million to the city of Redmond, little old 16 square miles. Just because we were allowed to shift from just protecting to restoring. And I'm trying to hurry up here, sorry. Public involvement, people want their environment to be healthy around where they live. I mean, we can't guarantee that people are going to have healthy environment everywhere, but we got to do something so that it's not all destroyed and we live in a sterile, unhealthy environment. Bye.